Okay, so the materials that you're going to need to make your mask, you're going to need fabric. So I have this fabric and I've already pre-washed it and dried it so it's nice and clean. I'm using two different fabrics. I'm using the stars for the outside of my mask, and then I'm using the teal fabric for the inside, so for the pocket. But again, both fabrics are pre-washed, they're cotton and they're woven. So you want to get as tightly woven as you can, and cotton makes a really good fabric for a mask just because it is a natural fabric. I have my safety pins, and really you just need one safety pin to feed the elastic through the tunnel of your mask, measuring tape, a pair of scissors, shears, thread clippers, my elastic, and you can use either elastic like this, or you can use, if you have elastic like this, I just find that it's not as comfortable. And then it helps if you have some sort of clips, or if you have straight pins, just so you can pin your fabric together. Okay, so the first step in making your mask is to make a paper pattern. So you have two pieces to your pattern. You have the main fabric, which is the front of the mask, and then you have the lining, and the lining is on the inside, which makes the pocket so that you can put a filter in your mask. Now, the main fabric piece is going to be 24 centimeters by 19 centimeters. So if you get out a ruler or measuring tape and just cut your paper to be that size, you have your pattern for your main fabric, and then your lining is going to be 18 centimeters by 13 centimeters. So the fabric that I'm gonna use, I've already cut it, and you wanna make sure that you're using a tightly woven fabric, all right? So it's nice and tightly woven together. It's cotton. Cotton is a natural fabric, so being that it's so close to your face and you have the fabric against your face and you're breathing on it, natural fabrics are your best bet for this. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your two lining pieces and you're going to separate them, all right? And you're going to fold it over on the wrong side. Now this fabric, it doesn't have a good side or a bad side because it looks the same on this side and on this side. But if you did have a fabric that had a good side and a bad side, you would take it and you would fold it over on the bad side. And you want to fold it over about 1.5 centimeters, and then you're going to press it down with the iron. So I'll just get my measuring tape here. And I'm just gonna make sure it's about 1.5 centimeters, which it is. And then I'm going to iron it down on both of them. And again, when you're ironing, make sure that you're ironing down on the long side. So the one side that is longer, right, as opposed to the shorter side. Okay, so I'm going to iron this down, press it down. So I have it about 1.5 centimeters flipped over onto the bad side. And I'm just ironing on this old cloth and on my table. It's an old table. I don't actually have an ironing board, but make sure when you're using the iron, you're careful, right? Obviously the iron is really hot. We don't want no one burning themselves. But we want to press this over so that when we go to sew it, it stays for us. All right, so after you've pressed it, you basically just hold the iron down on your crease just for even just a couple seconds. Lift your iron up. Again, make sure that when you lift your iron up and you're leaving it, you always tilt it on the heels. We don't want to leave the iron with the hot plate face down, or we could start a fire. All right, so we have our lining, we have it flipped over, and then I'm just going to repeat it with the second piece. Okay, so once your lining is pressed down, folded over onto the bad side, you're just going to thread up your sewing machine and you are going to sew the fold down. All right, so again, I'm just going to use a straight stitch. My stitch length is 2.5. There's no zigzag because it's a straight stitch. Make sure that when you start and stop, you do your back stitch so that your stitching doesn't come out. So I sewed a couple stitches. I'm now going to back stitch to reinforce it. And then I'm going to sew to the end. And I did my back stitch. All right, so that's the first one. Then you're just going to trim the threads. Either use your thread cutter on your sewing machine or you can use your scissors. And again, I'm going to put my second one in and I'm just going to do the same thing. All right, once you have your lining, you have it folded over, you're going to take your main fabric. All right, so this is my main fabric. Now this fabric does have a good side and a bad side. So the good side is the side that has the print that, that you want to see in the end. And then the bad side, the print is usually just a little bit more faded. So in order to do this next step, I'm going to take my lining pieces, and now I want to put good sides to good sides. Now I know this lining doesn't have a good side and bad side, but the good side is now the side that doesn't have the fold over, right? Whereas on the bad side, you can see that this is the side that you folded it over to sew. So you take your lining pieces, I'm just gonna cut those threads. And you're going to put, so good side to good side, and you want to center the lining onto the good side, and we have one piece here. The part that you sewed over is going to go kind of into the middle. I'm going to take my next piece, and I'm just gonna trim these, and I'm going to put this one down at the top. So this is what's going to form the pocket. And it doesn't matter which one goes under and which one goes on top. They could be reversed. It really doesn't matter. The most important thing here is just making sure that the lining is centered on your main fabric. So you can use a measuring tape if you want. Make sure it's centered. Once it's centered, you're going to now sew down the sides, so the top and the bottom of your mask. So I'm putting it in, and don't worry about your seam allowances for this. I'm really just using the end of my presser foot as a guide, but you don't have to use like 3/8 or 5/8 for this. So again, straight stitch, so sew a couple stitches. I'm gonna back stitch, and then I'm gonna keep sewing. And I'm gonna back stitch. I'll take that out. Just trim my threads on my thread cutter. All right, and I'm gonna repeat that with the other side. All right, so that's in. Again, a couple stitches, back stitch, sew to the end. Okay, so after you have that done, you can see, you can open it up, and it should all be good sides. So the good side of my fabric, the good side of my lining, all right? And then what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna use your iron again, and you're gonna wanna press this all down so it's nice and clean along the seams here. Okay, so I'm just gonna, again, press down my seams, make everything nice and crisp so it's easier to sew. All right, so once you have it pressed down with my lining fabric onto my main fabric, I'm gonna flip it over. And once you flip it over, you're gonna fold the teal or your lining fabric, whatever fabric that is. And I'm going to fold it right where it is sewn to my main fabric. So kind of right at the where the two fabrics join, that's where I'm gonna fold it. And then I'm gonna do the same thing at the bottom. All right. And then I'm gonna press this, especially here and here. Now, if you don't have an iron, or maybe you don't want to use the iron, you can do this without ironing. It just makes it a little bit trickier just because you don't have those nice crisp seams. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to fold or flip this over, and now we have to make the pleats. So we want to have 3 pleats on our mask. So you basically just start, and I have my, my finger under, and you're just making pleats. All right, so I have 1 pleat, and it might take you a few tries to get them to be even. So I have 3 pleats here. Now the mask, once you have the 3 pleats in, should be about 10 centimeters in length. So I'm just gonna take my measuring tape and I'm gonna see how I'm doing here. So mine is exactly 10 centimeters. So once you have your pleats, you want to make sure that the pleats stay so that they don't, they stay in place. So I'm just going to use binder clips, and if you have clips like this, they work good, or if you have actual sewing pins, straight pins, use those. And I'm just going to clip the side where the pleats join, just on the one on the opposite side that I'm gonna do first. So I have my clips, and I just find that these work nice at holding the fabric. I'm then gonna take this and I'm going to sew. And I'm gonna sew right beside my lining, and I'm basically sewing the fabric so that it keeps these pleats. All right, so if you end up sewing a little bit onto your lining fabric, that's totally fine. It doesn't really matter. All right, so I'm gonna sew a couple stitches, back stitch, keep sewing. And back stitch. And then you're just gonna repeat this on the other side. Okay, so once you have your seam sewn down, so I did a row of stitching here, I did a row of stitching here, right beside my lining. You're just gonna take your iron and you're going to just press this down again, just to get those pleats in there. So I'm just doing it from the back. And then I can flip my mask over and I can do it from the front. Okay, so far this is what my mask looks like. So I have 3 nice pleats in there. Right, I always find either the top or the bottom pleat tends to be a little bit bigger, but that's all right. So what we want to do next is we want to make a tunnel for our elastic. So we're going to put elastic in to go around your ears. So in order to make the tunnel, I'm just going to cut off these loose threads. Okay, so you're going to go to your end piece, and on the bad side, the side with the lining, you're going to do 2 folds. So you're going to take the end of your fabric and fold it to where your lining starts. So that's my first fold. And then I'm gonna fold it all over again. And that's gonna give us a nice clean edge. And you wanna make sure that, because this becomes the tunnel for your elastic, you wanna make sure that it's wide enough for your elastic. I'm gonna take my iron and I'm gonna carefully press this. So press that down, and then you're gonna take it to your sewing machine and you're going to sew it. All right, so I'm gonna take this to my sewing machine. Now when I sew, I'm gonna stitch fairly close to the end here, just so that I have enough room to put my elastic in. So to my sewing machine, and just gonna make sure I can see where my needle's gonna go down. Okay, so again, I'm gonna stitch this with my back stitch. So sew a couple, back stitch, sew to the end, and back stitch. And pull that out. I'll trim my threads. All right, and now I'm just going to repeat that process on this side. So I'm going to do the double fold and then I'm going to stitch it down. Okay, so that's pressed down. I'm gonna take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this. Okay, so I'm just sewing this again, doing my back stitch. back stitch again. So the only thing left to do now is to put the elastic in our mask. All right, so for elastic, initially when I started making masks, I was using this. So it's about a 1/4 inch elastic. But then when I was looking for more elastic, I came across this really thin elastic at Michael's, and I just did a curbside pickup just because I wanted to try this. And it's really thin, almost like if you were to use a really thin elastic for your hair. It's kind of similar to that. And I found that this elastic is actually quite a bit more comfortable behind the ears. So if you can get a hold of this safely, then I would recommend using this elastic instead of this elastic. Now, how much elastic you need, it kind of depends on how tight or how big you want your mask. So the masks should fit fairly snug against the face, so you might have to put the elastic in, try it on, and then you can adjust it from there. Color-wise for this mask, I am going to use, so I got 2 of these and they come with lots of different colors, but it did come with a gray, and I think I'm going to use this gray. It's similar to, almost looks like black. Now I'm going to measure out 30 centimeters of elastic. So this elastic's pretty stretchy. So if your elastic isn't stretchy, you could probably measure out a little bit more, maybe 35 centimeters. So I'm just going to measure out my 30 centimeters. And you need 2 pieces of elastic, 1 for each side of your mask. Okay, so I have my elastic that I'm going to use. Now, in order to put the elastic in this tunnel, it's best if you use a safety pin. So safety pin, and you're just going to put the elastic through the safety pin. So this elastic's really thin, so it's kind of hard to put the safety pin through it. But what I did find is that at the bottom where it kind of twists around, if I just kind of pull the elastic down and around, it's actually really secure and you don't have to worry about poking it through, because that's kind of tricky. So take your elastic and you're just gonna feed it through. So this part can be kind of tricky, but I'm just pushing it through, right? I can feel my safety pin in the middle here in the tunnel. I'm just going to pull that, and I'm just going to keep pushing my safety pin, and hopefully it will come out the other side. There. All right, so after your elastic is through, just take your safety pin off. You're going to take your elastic, and I've just been tying it in a knot. It's too thin to put into the sewing machine and try to sew it back and forth, but if you just wrap it around your fingers and tie a knot, you can just do that and trim off the excess, and then you can just tuck the knot into the tunnel part, and then that way you won't be able to actually see it. So now it looks nice and neat. All right, and I'm just going to repeat that on the other side. All right, so I put the elastic in both sides. All right, and I tucked the knot so that it's in the tunnel, you can't see it, and now your mask is done. The nice thing about this is that it does have that pocket, right? So you can put a filter in, and I will show you what I use for filter. Okay, so when I did my research, and from what I read, I found that the blue shop towels are actually supposed to be really good at filtering particles. So I got some shop towel. I found this at Canadian Tire, and I think it was like $2.49 for a giant roll. So you can make a ton of filters out of that. So I cut one, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna open my mask up. I'm gonna take my filter. I'm gonna put this in. All right, so I have my filter in there. It's a little it might be a little bit bunchy, but you can try to smooth it out. All right, that's better. So now my mask is done. I have my filter in the little pocket, and what you do is after you come home, you can just pop your filter out, put it into the garbage, and you can throw your mask into the wash machine.